So, hello everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining. Tonight's satsang would be the 13th satsang in 6 days because there was an intensive that was being run this week. So, I might keep the satsang to an hour or so without question and answers. As a result of just finishing up 2 simultaneous intensives, there's a topic that I'd like to discuss. I won't really discuss the intensive, which really used critical thinking as the topic to focus in on how we have to question our thinking and look at how significant our thinking is in putting in place the psychological identity that is where the suffering stems from. So that was the topic of the intensive, and one of the things that came out of it is the marrying together of the top-down teachings and the bottom-up teachings. And if anyone's unfamiliar with what each of those phrases represents, i.e. top-down, bottom-up teachings, they are phrases that refer to teachings that focus on different aspects or look at describing life from different points of view. And when life and what is important is described from these different points of view, the descriptions are quite different. The focus on or the emphasis is on quite different things. So a top-down teaching basically transcends daily living, relegates content of daily living, the appearance of the human being, pleasure and pain, and describing things as dualistic, relegates that into the realm of the unreal, the illusory, and maybe even ignorance, and focuses on what is described in the top-down teachings as reality, truth, and the real. Non-separation, non-duality. And so in the top-down teachings, one's true nature as awareness or consciousness is focused on. And the body, the thinking, emotions, anything linked to the world of duality is described at best as transitory appearance, not real in nature. And why it is described that way is because what is pointed at and emphasized as unchanging, ever-present, true is the awareness that is always here, has to be here, in order for experience to be happening. And that awareness is fundamental to experience. That awareness is something we can come to know ourselves as in essence. And it is something that has been covered up by the existing structure that perceives life in a very dualistic manner. So, the way that the top-down teachings work are to encourage a focus on that which is described as true and real, and that which is described as having been forgotten or overlooked. And to aid the motivation towards seeing that which isn't presently seen or is covered up, a lot of the things that cover it up are relegated to the realm of the unreal. And it's very accurate from the perspective of the non-separating perception, what we could call the seeing of non-duality, the falling away of duality. From that perspective, which is not just a theoretical or a conceptual perspective, but rather something that can present itself experientially directly, where there can be a knowing of these concepts that are put forward in the top-down teachings. And from that place, the top-down teachings stop being just pointers, and they can be what we would describe as a known truth or a reality that we know directly. And when I say that we know directly, I'm not talking about the sense of the person knowing it directly or the person knowing it directly, but rather it is the transcendence of the personal that reveals the impersonal perspective, the impersonal, non-dual, non-separated, what might be called the absence of experience, the absence of subject-object relationship, the absence of the sense of an experiencer, where what arises might best be described as just experiencing happening. Experiencing without an experiencer, where all that is arising is known to be not separate from that which is aware of it. In other words, arising within consciousness, made of consciousness, witnessed by consciousness. Not just as words, but as something revealed, you could say. Sometimes referred to as the healed perspective, the healed mind, where the lens of duality, where the many are seen as separate and not really a cohesive whole, where that falls away and all that is revealed is the oneness that can be known to be what we are. And from that perspective, causation ceases to appear in the same way as it did, and so we could say that causation is not how life unfolds. Time ceases to exist, and life appears as a spontaneous happening arising in the present now. All of which can sound a little new agey, a little conceptual. But it is the change that happens as the pointers continuously point awareness to that which is real. Awareness, pointing awareness towards itself. Pointing awareness beyond appearance. And that can lead to this alternate perspective. And in that, a lot that is said to be covered up presents itself. So it becomes apparent, I am not what I thought I was. There is the potential to, what we could say, rest in being, where thinking seems less relevant, where the simple awareness of the experience from a perspective of an impersonal knowing, an impersonal knowing of the experience as not separate from what we are, that is in itself enough. There doesn't seem to be the need to think about what is arising. It is just witnessed. And there's a connection that comes from there. There is a self-contentedness that comes from there. So the top-down teachings are essentially trying to create this awakening, this self-realization, which really means a realization of the self, the true self. The true self turns out to be, in essence, the very the verb of awareness. So the true self ends up being awareness, and so self-realization is simply awareness becoming aware of awareness. Awareness becoming aware of the true subject, the true self. Not as an object, but as itself. Awareness, aware of itself by itself. From the top-down perspective, what is focused on as the yearning in the search is a search for reality, a search for truth, a search for self, a search for oneness, a search for the end of separation, all of which require the end of the seeker to be revealed, all of which are said to be the true nature beyond or prior to the separating mind. So the focus, once again, is truth, reality, non-duality, oneness, non-separation, consciousness or self or awareness. All of which are aspects of the transcendence, the awakening. Bottom-up teaching takes what we could say is a more practical perspective, which doesn't mean it's a better teaching. It's a different teaching that is more practical because it focuses on practical daily living and points out those aspects that are functioning in practical daily living that act as an obstacle for the realization of self. However, the methodology that leads to various insights and realizations doesn't take a transcendence perspective. That's the job of the top-down teachings. The bottom-up teachings will talk about daily life, will talk about decision-making, preferences, biological reactions, psychological reactions, the existence of a human being, and then we'll focus on the extensions of the human being that can be referred to as a misunderstanding of who we really are, a misunderstanding of what we really need, all based on a disconnection from the true self and the existence of a psychological self that has been put in place as part of the human development, as part of our genes and up-to-date conditioning. And from that perspective, what will be pointed out as the error or the obstacle the misunderstanding that covers up a clarity of what we are in essence. What is described is a misunderstanding that takes ourselves to be primarily and exclusively a physical entity, an entity that is separate from all other entities, an entity that is in control and needs to be in control in order for things to take place, an entity that is in control and is dependent on outcomes, dependent on pleasure or pain, in fact, dependent on pleasure, to be eventually, in the future, complete and therefore potentially satisfied at some point in the future when circumstance has delivered essentially an ideal life, an ideal circumstantial life. Clearly, the two different teachings will resonate with different seekers, and that's in part why there are these different approaches. And not only are there several approaches within the field of non-duality, which fits into the category of jnana yoga, which is the yoga or the path of wisdom, as opposed to several other paths for seekers that are different to the path of wisdom. There is the path of bhakti, or the path of love, or devotion. So that's bhakti yoga is different to jnana yoga. Jnana yoga is wisdom. Bhakti yoga is the path of love or devotion. Then there is karma yoga, which is the yoga of action, where maybe one will devote oneself to helping others, being in service to others, practice. And there's also the path of tantra. And each of these different paths will have different process suited for different temperaments of seekers. And although the methodology, the way it is spoken about, although those are different, they essentially are undoing the same error in different ways, the same obstacle in different ways. So they really all lead to the same place. And if we take the path of bhakti and the path of jnana, they turn into each other. So a seeker who starts off down the path of bhakti ends up as a jnani. And the jnani, the man of understanding that has started through the path of jnana, ends up as a bhakti. Because they are essentially two aspects of the whole, two aspects of the self. There's the path of meditation. And these paths are not necessarily completely exclusively one way. There can be a mix within the path where several of the paths intersect. So in Ramana's experience, as an example of how several of the paths will intertwine. He had a Tantra style awakening, and yet a lot of his following journey was in relation to jnana yoga and meditation yoga. Another difference between the path of meditation as an exclusive path and the path of jnana, they are described, one as the ant path and one as the bird path. The meditation path is the ant path because it can tend to be much slower. It doesn't. A devotee of meditation isn't really given much instruction. The insights come from within the meditation, from spending hours and hours and days and weeks and months and years in primarily the practice that ends up being the absence of practice is sitting in meditation. And the master might give the odd pointer here and there, but not much, not large amounts of concepts, as happens in the jnana yoga path, where there are much more pointers and concepts. That means that the learning, in a way, can be accelerated, unless, of course, the thinking mind grabs hold of the concepts and ends up creating a sort of castle of concepts, thinking that the intellectual knowledge, because things can be repeated as learned information, thinking that that is the understanding, which it isn't. In the jnana yoga path, the pointers are there essentially to be transcended also, as pointers towards a ground that we can come in direct contact with. And if we mistake the pointers as the truth, we will think that understanding has to do with knowing a lot about non-duality and being able to talk about it, being able to have intellectual debates. And so a lot of pundits and scholars fall into that category, which is a trap, let's say, of the mind grabbing hold of information and thinking this is what will deliver happiness, another attachment, another form for the identity, the ego, to become identified with and gain some sense of boost. But once again, that in time hopefully falls away, and a deeper knowing can kick in. It may not. It may, the seeker may remain always feeling that this can't be quite right. I know so much, and yet I feel something is missing. And obviously what's missing is the connection to that which truly delivers what we're looking for. So that leads us on to, what are we really looking for? Are we looking to know thyself? Are we looking for oneness? Are we looking for truth? And it may seem like that's what we're looking for, especially the top-down teaching says, yes, that's what we're looking for. And it's very valid. It serves its purpose as to why that is set up as the journey. In practical terms, if we look at a bottom-up teaching, the bottom-up teaching will say, actually, those realizations or seeking truth, oneness, is really a means to a consequence. And the consequence is peace of mind in daily living, or the end of suffering. And you'll find that in the top-down teaching sprinkled in there, but not directly said. The emphasis is on your true nature, awakening to the non-dual nature of life. And remember, comparing two things can often lead to it sounding like one is right and one is wrong, one is better than the other. And that's not the point of the comparison or the explanation. They both definitely serve their purpose, and within the category of jnana yoga or non-duality, both the top-down and the bottom-up are actually teachings of non-duality. Even a teaching that talks about practical daily living, where essentially a human being is acknowledged as existing, the pleasure and the pain, the duality of life on the surface is acknowledged. It's still a teaching of non-duality, because when we look at the core message, it says the misunderstanding is a misunderstanding because even though the appearance of life is dual, the non-dual nature of life is not appreciated. And in practical terms, in daily living terms, the non-dual nature arises in the recognition that the human being is not separate from Source. The human being is not a separate, autonomous entity functioning according to its own will. That in fact, the human being that might feel and experience separate and autonomous is always connected to Source, or another way of seeing that is that the human being is an expression or an extrusion from life, meaning organic life. And so in some of the older non-dual teachings, even top-down non-dual teachings, we are said to be a result of the five elements, or we are the five elements, which means the human being is made up of the five basic elements, which really mean we are just part of everything else, which is also made up of the five elements. Both in the top-down and bottom-up teachings, essentially what is being described is all there is Source. It might appear that there is so much differentiation, but that is just appearance, and ultimately the varied appearance is all Source, all God. All there is God. All there is consciousness. They are interchangeable words. And so that is what is being described from either perspective. And if we truly understand what that means, the implication of that is that separation is just an illusion. An appreciation of the fact that the human being, all human beings, from the beginning of time to the end of time, are only ever functioning according to their design, which means they're biological instruments. And the thinking that feels so personal, the emotions that feel so personal, are outputs of the biological instrument. And if awareness lands on the thinking, and aided by the concept, if awareness and the intellect or the working mind see that the thoughts, the decisions, are essentially arising out of one way of saying it is they rise out of nowhere into experience or into awareness, awared by that awareness. And so our assumption that they're coming from a thinker, like an autonomous me that has its own thoughts, can fall away, and there can be a direct appreciation that that which I have believed to be my thought is actually a thought arising out of nothing. Or a thought coming from a machine which is made up of our genes and up-to-date conditioning. And the thought is an output. And the implication of that when it's seen is there is no me. That the sense of who I am as a personal entity is all contained in the feelings and the thoughts which are spontaneously arising. There isn't a me that has thoughts, a me that has feelings, but rather there are thoughts and feelings that arise that contain the sense of me inside them. And so when that is really seen, not intellectually but directly, which requires the grace of destiny to create a witnessing of thoughts, which means a distance from the thoughts that previously awareness was heavily identified with, and therefore there was no capacity to see them as objects. And if grace kicks in and this witnessing happens, it becomes very apparent that a thought has a very special power. It is a special effect. A thought arises, it wasn't there, and a thought of excitement or desire or resentment arises, and the one who resents is contained in the thought. If this gets seen, the realization is, I don't exist. I don't exist in the way that I've always assumed that I exist. That is where the bottom-up teachings essentially meets the top-down teachings, where there is a realization that the appearance of a human being and its thoughts and its feelings are less real than they appear when there is heavy identification with being the body. And from that realization, that may have been inspired by a description that says everything is happening according to God's will. Thoughts arise in a body-mind organism. Thoughts arise as a result of the body-mind organism structure, which is a result of one's genes and up-to-date conditioning. Two factors that we've never been in control of. We weren't in control of the sperm and egg coming together that produced a blueprint from which the organism grew. And we weren't, as that organism, or the organism wasn't in control of the new conditioning that is received moment after moment as a result of being in life, that becomes intimately part and parcel of the genetic structure. So the organism is a combination of the genes and up-to-date conditioning, making essentially a biological robot. And it is the impersonal consciousness of Source that links to that biological instrument and functions through it as personal consciousness. And it's the consciousness that can become aware of the thoughts as objects, can become aware of the feelings and emotions as objects, can in fact become aware of the body as an object arising in consciousness. And it's from there that the realization that life is happening, but without a me, that there isn't a doer, that life has always been happening, that there has never been a doer anywhere. There have been billions of beliefs in personal doership. And it's the dissolving of those beliefs in personal doership that leads to liberation, leads to the freedom from suffering. I'm of the strong conviction that in order for one seeking to lead to an integrated state of being able to function as the human being, free from the belief in doership and therefore free from suffering, meaning continuous unbroken peace of mind, both aspects of the non-dual teaching, both the bottom-up and the top-down teachings, need to set in such that there is a realization of the deeper essence that functions through the human being, an essence that can be rested into where thought seems irrelevant, where outcomes are not so important, where there is a self-confirmation, and there needs to be an appreciation that life is meant to be lived from the perspective of the human being. We are, in this story of life, a human being that has a destiny. And our destiny includes interacting with other human beings and functioning as a human being, which then means that we also need to be able to understand what our suffering is in practical terms. And suffering arises because of the belief in personal doership and attachment to outcome in the form of guilt, blame, pride, worry, and expectation. And if we understand that which is a very practical explanation, not only will a deep sense of connection to our essence arise, but there will also be an understanding of what our false sense of self manifests as. And that means that the system will start cutting off the habits that fed and kept that false sense of identity in place. We'll cut that off by the arising of concepts that remind us of the truth. For example, that I'm not the doer, the other isn't the doer, and therefore the attitude of blame towards the other for what they did that might have delivered pain, which is not really what they did, but rather what the story of life dictated happens according to or because of their specific genes and up-to-date conditionings and the unfolding circumstance that no one's been in control of. And so then an attitude that appreciates whatever happens in life is destiny unfolding, not the other's doing. The other is simply an instrument through which my destiny is being delivered. I am simply an instrument through which the other's destiny is being delivered. Sometimes we get what we want, pleasure. Sometimes we don't get what we want, pain. And Ramesh used to say sometimes we get much more than what we want. What the other delivers to us in terms of their actions, their behaviors, how they speak with us, whether they treat us with respect or they don't, whether they steal something or hurt us or hurt someone we like, whether they do nice things for us, give us compliments, and what we do in relation to the others, same set of things, behaviors, the way we talk about the other, what whether we show them respect, whether we're truthful or not. All of that is either pleasure or pain. And we have to start seeing that what I deliver to the other, what the other delivers to me, fits into the category of pleasure or pain by all means. Pleasure is nicer than pain. And the there's a wisdom. Treat the other as you would like to be treated yourself, if you can. If you find yourself treating the other in a way that when you look at it, you say, well, I wouldn't like to be treated that way. We can say that's not ideal, in that there might be a better way, but hopefully an attitude kicks in and realizes, but I'm only ever functioning according to God's will. I'm only ever functioning according to my design. And therefore, it must be destiny that this is how I functioned and that's the outcome, which is not an excuse to call that okay or pleasure if it happens to be pain, but it's a deep rationale of seeing the actuality of life that can cut off the psychological guilt or blame that is so prevalent in the human functioning. And when we look at it, that is an uncomfortableness with self, guilt and blame, that doesn't change things. It doesn't fix the past. It just eats away at us, either because we feel regret and shame or because we feel hatred and resentment. The realization of non-doership is not going to absolve us from consequence. So using it is not going to help as an excuse. Using the attitude of non-doership is not going to help us get out of the consequence that society will deliver to us, depending on whether we have delivered society pleasure or whether we have delivered society pain. If we deliver pleasure according to our functioning, which is a result of God's will or genes and up-to-date conditioning, society will reward us for pleasure and punish us for pain. And saying to a judge, if you are being judged for breaking the law, not my doing, the judge will say, I understand, not my doing either, but you have to go to prison. If that's how life unfolds, with the understanding that a breaking of the law happened, the consequence happened, and there can still be freedom while in prison, a freedom from guilt and shame, a freedom from blame and resentment for all the things in the past and all the things that are not as we would like them in the present. So no complaining in the present, no regrets about the past, and no expectations or attachment to the future. And if that happens, that's a description of living happily. Happily living doesn't mean perfect circumstance. It means the absence of suffering. The absence of suffering can be described differently as the presence of peace of mind. And that's what we're really looking for as human beings. That is the state that can exist on a continuous, unbroken basis, regardless of the circumstance. Because peace of mind understands, or peace of mind happens because there's a deep, deep understanding that life is a happening, not my doing, not the other's doing. And my happiness comes from peace of mind and not from circumstance. Circumstance will still need to be endured as a biological pleasure or biological pain. But freedom, peace of mind, freedom from suffering, which is peace of mind, exists independent of the pleasure or pain of circumstance, because it always results or depends on our attitude to circumstance. And it's the attitude of doership and attachment that creates guilt, blame, pride, worry, and expectation, which is our uncomfortableness with oneself, uncomfortableness with the other. And if it's the attitude of doership and the attitude of attachment to outcome that creates the uncomfortableness, it makes sense that it is the absence of that attitude, something we could call the attitude of non-doership and the attitude of non-attachment. But importantly, it is the absence, the silence really, the silence towards pain that was delivered to you last week. The silence of mind, that means the mind is not creating resentment based on the attitude of doership and attachment to outcomes. And that peace of mind doesn't kick in simply because there is an intellectual understanding of this, but gets deepened when we can rest in our own being, and from that place, the happening of life, the witnessing of life that confirms that life happens and it's not my doing, the witnessing of thoughts that confirms that thoughts arise, consequences or actions follow, and consequences to the actions follow that. It becomes palpably seen as an accurate description of life. And so from that place of abiding in self, these concepts become descriptions of how life is seen from there and how self is known, self independent of outcomes. One of the most effective ways of transcending the psychological self, which really means the identification with the conceptual idea of who we are, which we don't even know is an identification with the conceptual idea of who we are. It just feels like me. One of the ways of seeing past that is to be pointed at the fact that the awareness of life happens prior to any thinking about what is happening in life. And why that is radical is because from a very young age, the habit of continually thinking about what is seen, what is heard, what is thought, what is felt, the habit of thinking about it relative to a me has happened spontaneously to the seeing of life. And it isn't known that life happens independent of the thinking about life. So because life is circumstance and the body are recognized in each moment, and there is a thinking that happens simultaneously, somehow the system thinks that life is dependent on my thinking. It doesn't really see that the thinking comes after. And so because they happen almost simultaneously, the mind confuses it and somehow thinks, if I stopped thinking, life would stop happening. And so if attention is pointed at what we might start off saying, the faculty of sight or seeing, visual, the presence of what we call visual, and also the presence of sound. If awareness is pointed at, just be aware of the fact that there is sight. Not sight from the perspective of a body, but just be aware of the sight and be aware of the sound, which means really listen and be aware of the sounds that are heard. And it's not you hearing the sounds. The sounds arise, and then there is awareness of the sound. You are aware of the sound after it happens. And that doesn't require any thinking. The hearing and the seeing is always happening because the human is on. And there is a potential for there to be awareness of the fact that what we call daily life is always already happening. And there can become an awareness of that, which means a silent awareness. Awareness that realizes it isn't making the seeing happen or the hearing happen. That is happening automatically all the time. And then there is an awareness of that which is already happened. And that can be radically surprising, because the truth of the matter is we haven't abided in that dimension of being the silent awareness. Not being the human body that is being silently aware, but rather being the awareness that is also aware of the presence of the visual of the body. And then, from that point of view, the body is just an object of sight. And that witnessing presence doesn't need to think. And it feels grounded in its own awareness of awareness happening. It's where we can actually be silent for extended periods of time. If we're grounded in thinking, we might be able to force silence, but it's almost like holding one's breath, and the thinking desire or need is building up until sometimes it says, now can I carry on thinking? From this other place, there's a silence that is sustainable, just aware of what is arising, not needing to change it, being aware that it is all happening, and I am that is aware of it. I am that which is aware of the body as part of the arising of what's happening. The body is part of what is arising. And what I truly am is not the body, but that which is prior to that which is arising. Prior meaning separated from and able to witness it. And that witnessing that feels like a separated from eventually morphs into witnessing that is all-inclusive of what's arising, not separate from.